sky was their compass, the stars their scripture, the earth a mirror of something vast and ancient that didn't just live above them, but once stood among them. On the Yucatan Peninsula, at the heart of Chichen Itza, an enormous pyramid rises like a fossilized echo of divine descent. The Maya called him Kukulkan. The Aztecs knew him as Quetzalcoatl, a flying serpent, a being so powerful, so transformative that even light and shadow were choreographed to announce his arrival. Twice a year, on the spring and autumn equinoxes, the sun casts a serpent-shaped shadow that slithers down El Castillo's steps. The spectacle is so precise, so eerie, so intentional, that many wonder, was this, a myth, or was it a memory? Was Kukulkan a god, or was he a traveler?
Right, well, nothing screams alien superintelligence like snakes and staircases. I swear, if I see one more flying lizard statue being called a spacecraft, I'm opening an intergalactic lawsuit.
Well, buckle up, Zorgo, because things are about to get orbital. Before we decode the serpent gods, decipher Mayan glyphs, and, possibly crash land a few alien spaceships, let's talk about something even more mysterious than interstellar evidence. And that is actually the question of why you're not a member of our Patreon yet. If Kukulkan showed up today, he would not be storming pyramids. He would be browsing the Watcher files and our bonus episodes and exclusive theories like, the rest of us. When you join our Patreon, you get early access to episodes, behind-the-scenes breakdowns. Actually, they're episodes that don't have any commercials, no advertisements, that sort of thing. But you also get, members-only live streams and the occasional Zorgo rant that legally counts as therapy. Now, look, digital privacy is cool and all, but esoteric truths, cosmic conspiracies, and interdimensional sarcasm is pretty much where it's at. That's the real vault. So come and join us at patreon.com. The link is in the video description below, and we'd be happy to have you because, some mysteries are just too weird to decode alone. Now, let's get real. Ancient astronaut theorists have spent decades pointing to stone carvings, light phenomena, and suspiciously advanced math to argue that ancient Mesoamerican civilizations were not alone. The story goes something like this. Kukulkan descended. He brought knowledge, and he promised to return. But the official story, the one found in, that the academics push, says otherwise. That the Maya, like all great civilizations, rose through their own genius. No space snakes required. So you have to ask which one it actually is. Is El Castillo a temple to a serpent god or a cosmic marker for something more? Is Lord Pacal flying through the afterlife, or is he piloting a rocket ship? And is the real mystery just buried under jungle and dust? Or, again, have we been looking at everything wrong all along?
Here's a wild thought. Maybe the Maya were brilliant and spiritual without needing help from E.T. Or maybe the aliens were just really into snakes like me. I have a huge anaconda at home, you see. I named it Big Bertha. So who knows?
Well, according to mainstream archaeology, the Maya civilization emerged around 2000 BCE, and it reached its peak between 250 and 900 CE. They built massive stone cities like Chichen Itza, Palenque, Copan, and Tikal, each one packed with temples, observatories, and pyramids. They were astronomers, architects, mathematicians, and timekeepers. They charted the movement of Venus with precision that modern telescopes would envy. They developed one of the world's most sophisticated writing systems. They invented the concept of zero independently, and they tracked solar and lunar eclipses centuries in advance. And they did it all, the story goes, with simple tools and no metal, no wheels, no pulleys, no animals for heavy labor, just manpower, stone, and genius.
Right. They didn't have the wheel, but somehow managed city planning that makes New York look like it was built with Legos and whiskey.
But the official story runs into problems, right? Let's start with El Castillo, okay? The central pyramid at Chichen Itza. Every March 21st and September 21st, as the sun sets, a shadow shaped like a serpent slithers down the pyramid's northern stairway. It culminates in the stone head of Kukulkan at the base. Mainstream archaeologists explain this as intentional design. The Maya, they say, used solar observations and trial and error construction techniques to create the effect. But wait a second, this alignment isn't a coincidence. It's based on precise knowledge of the Earth's tilt, the sun's movement, and complex shadow geometry, all without computer modeling or modern surveying equipment.
So you're telling me they eyeballed a heliacal alignment using shadows and rocks? Yeah, no. I can't even park my car straight with backup cameras.
In 1952, archaeologists discovered the tomb of Lord Pacal beneath the Temple of the Inscriptions in Palenque. The sarcophagus lid shows Pacal in a strange seated position surrounded by what appears to be flames, breathing tubes, and what some say is a rocket. Honestly, you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of the pilot character in the film Aliens. But anyway, archaeologists say that it's all symbolic. It shows the tree of life and the journey to the underworld. But, you know, even to the untrained eye, it really does look like a cockpit. He's manipulating controls. His feet are on pedals. His nose is connected to some kind of a device. Flames shoot out below. So the question is, is this just religious iconography or technical schematics passed down from visitors above?
Or plot twist, it's just really good PR. If you're trying to stay in power, claiming Grandma was a sky goddess really does kind of, seal the deal.
Well, one of the Maya's most famous contributions to pop culture is the long count calendar. It tracks a 5,125-year cycle that ended on December 21st, 2012. Well, spoiler alert, the world did not end. Here we all are. But the date did coincide with a rare galactic alignment. The Earth, Sun, and center of the Milky Way galaxy all lined up for the first time in 26,000 years. The mainstream view is that, this is all just a super awesome, interesting coincidence. But there is another view which basically says, hey, message received. The takeaway is that the mainstream story, it has gaps. Stunning astronomical precision without advanced optics, depictions of flying gods and rocket riders written off as metaphor, global myths about feathered serpents and star beings dismissed as just coincidence. But the coincidences are starting to, pile up like limestone blocks on a stairway built for the gods.
Translation. We gave up on explaining it, so aliens.
Now, here is where the story begins to spiral outward into the domain of forbidden theories, ancient astronaut hypotheses, and civilizations that may not have been entirely human. For decades, fringe researchers like Eric von Daniken have proposed that the Maya, the Aztecs, and even the mysterious builders of Teotihuacan were not alone in their achievements, that the sudden emergence of high-precision astronomy, architecture, and mathematics wasn't gradual human innovation, but the result of outside influence. But it's not just, von Daniken anymore. Let's break down the most prominent alternative theories circling this ancient enigma. Number 1, ancient astronaut hypotheses. There is this claim that advanced extraterrestrial beings visited Earth, thousands of years ago. The gods of Mesoamerica, Kukulkan, Quetzalcoatl, and more, were not mythic beings, but actual visitors from the stars. And their ships, they were mistaken for dragons and serpents or flint knives descending from the heavens. And their message, it was encoded in myth, in calendar cycles, and temple architecture. An example of this would be Lord Pacal's tomb, which is seen not as symbolic death imagery, but literal documentation of a launch sequence. The breathing tube is life support, the flames are thrusters, the seated posture mimics an astronaut during takeoff. Even the famed descending light serpent at El Castillo may represent not just the arrival of a deity, but re-entry.
Yes, because clearly ancient gods would use a light show for their arrival. Who needs cloaking tech when you've got shadows and triangles?
Number 2 would be planetary resonance and sacred geometry. And the claim here is that Maya structures were built not just for worship or astronomy, but as actual instruments. They resonate with planetary frequencies, they encode mathematical constants, and may even have functioned kind of like cyclic amplifiers. For example, the pyramid of Kukulkan's height to base ratio is approximately pi squared. Others reflect pi, the golden ratio. The number of steps per side is 91, which all adds up to 364, plus the top platform, and you got 365. One step for each day of the year. These are not coincidences, they're intentional. The structures are tuned to time, frequency, and consciousness, according to this theory. And some suggest that they were teaching technologies, structures that could tune the mind to receive information from non-physical sources. Number 3, the Milky Way as a cosmic portal. And the claim here is that the Mayans' obsession with the Milky Way, especially the dark rift or the galactic center, was not actually religious at all. It was technological. They saw it as the birth canal of the universe, and some believe that it functioned as a literal Stargate or a wormhole, and that the alignment in 2012 signaled a moment when the gate opened, if only briefly. They may have encoded this cosmic countdown into their long count calendar, waiting pretty much for the day when the Earth aligned with that celestial bridge.
Because when I think advanced aliens, I think giant galactic womb.
Then there's number 4, which is global dragon cults as alien memory. And the claim is that the feathered serpent isn't just some cool symbol, right? It's everywhere. In Mesoamerica, in China, in Mesopotamia, India, and Greece. The dragon, the flying serpent, the radiant, all-wise being from the sky. Some see this as mythological archetype, and others see it as memory, a distorted echo of the same extraterrestrial contact experienced across civilizations. Now, a shared memory of serpent-shaped ships or beings might have, for example, be something like in Greece, where the dragon houses atop Mount Ochi are linked to Zeus descending from the sky. In Mesoamerica, Kukulkan and Quetzalcoatl arrive by air, and they bring gifts of civilization. And that motif, it repeats with eerie consistency across cultures.
So let me get this straight. Aliens arrived looking like snakes, taught math, then peaced out for 26,000 years? What, did they forget their keys?
Number 5 is Teotihuacan's golden orbs. Were they star models or were they alien relics? In 2003, a tunnel was discovered beneath the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. At the end of it was a chamber filled with hundreds of clay spheres coated in mica and golden flecks. And nobody knows what they're for. Some believe that the orbs represent planetary bodies, and others say that they were part of a ritual device, perhaps even an ancient simulation system or navigational map. And then there is the location, which is directly beneath the pyramid dedicated to Quetzalcoatl. So, was this a burial site or a launch pad? There does seem to be a pattern here of descent, of light, of geometry, and calendar cycles not only tracking time, but pointing beyond it. Across cultures, the gods didn't arise here on Earth, but they did descend to it. And they always promised to return. The mainstream academia, they call this mythology. But what if it's, like I said before, what if it's actually memory?
Or maybe, just maybe, ancient people were creative, intelligent, and liked telling dramatic stories. You know, you don't need a UFO to explain a good bedtime myth.
Well, no, you don't. But I think that there's a lot of unanswered questions here that pretty much nobody is asking. Most ancient astronaut videos, they follow a script. The gods came from the sky. This carving, well, it looks like a rocket ship. And you pretty much can't move big rocks without aliens. But they rarely dig deeper. They present a mystery, they toss in a spaceship, and then they cue the dramatic music. But real mysteries don't get solved by playing to expectations. So I want to pause for a minute, and I want to ask 5 deeper questions that, like I said, I don't think anybody else is asking. And I think that the answers might be stranger than the theories themselves. And these questions are stuff that people should be asking. Questions like, number 1, if Kukulkan was an alien, why did he appear as a snake? Let's get something straight, okay? If you are trying to impress a primitive species with your cosmic wisdom, maybe you don't show up as a serpent. Why would a star-traveling being choose a form associated with deception, fear, and death in many cultures? Unless it wasn't a choice. What if that was that being's actual form? Or what if the snake is not a form, but a symbol? What if it represents DNA, the double helix, or energy spirals, kundalini, or the Milky Way's swirling arms? Or what if it wasn't about literal snakes and dragons at all, but serpentine or reptilian beings like the seraphim in Judeo-Christian scripture and tradition? Maybe ancient people saw the energy trails of crafts, coiling through the sky, interpreting the motion and not the form.
Or maybe they just drew, painted, or chipped away on stone whatever freaked them out last week. You ever tried drawing an alien with zero context? You're a mammal with a lizard brain. I know you'd probably do the same thing.
Number 2, why is there no debris? There's no wires, Zorgo. There's no alloys. There's no tech. So we're told that extraterrestrials visited, shared knowledge, and built pyramids, but where's their stuff? There's no tools, there's no power cells, there's no circuit boards, no alien iPads. If aliens helped build Chichen Itza or Palenque, wouldn't there be something left behind? Unless it wasn't physical tech at all, or at least tech that we would recognize, right? Maybe the technology was non-material. Maybe it was resonance-based, psychic, or encoded in consciousness itself. Maybe the tools were biological. What if it was all nanotechnology that was built into the stone itself, that made up these cities and these great monuments?
I knew it! I knew you were going to say the tech was invisible. That's the ancient astronaut equivalent, of my girlfriend lives in Canada. when she's really an AI bot.
Right. That actually, you got a good point there. But number 3, are pyramids meant to represent the sky or simulate it? We always say these structures align with the stars, but what if that's backwards? What if they weren't just pointing at the sky? They were mimicking its mechanics. Teotihuacan's layout mimics or reflects the Orion Belt. El Castillo's mirrors the solar year, and the tunnels beneath are kind of like wormholes. Could these cities have been built, not as maps, but as machines? Not just to represent the cosmos, but to interact with it. Think of them as spiritual computers, running rituals instead of programs. Number 4, why do these myths emphasize return and not just arrival? Kukulkan didn't just arrive, he showed up, he gave a whole lot of wisdom, then he left, and then he promised to come back. And Quetzalcoatl was said to reappear in times of crises. Even Lord Pacal was buried in a spacecraft-shaped sarcophagus, as if he was waiting to launch again. These aren't stories about gods showing up. They're stories about gods coming back, which raises a troubling question. Are we the experiment? Are we waiting for their return or their inspection? What?
Awesome. So, you're telling me that you and your people are the lab rats, hoping for a surprise pop quiz from your cosmic overlords. You realize that's pathetic, right? Right? Well, it's time to level up, bucko. Oh, wait. That's what all your YouTube Reiki channels are mumbling about these days, isn't it? Cosmic ascension and whatnot?
Yes, actually, there are YouTube channels that kind of do that, but let's move on to the next point, okay? The next question. Number 5. Could all of this be psychological technology? Anyway, here's a twist in all of this. What if none of this is about aliens or rockets, but about the mind? What if the pyramids, the calendars, and star myths are neural triggers designed to activate parts of our consciousness that we've forgotten how to use? The serpent represents awakened energy. The Equinox light show triggers energeometry. The sarcophagus isn't a spaceship, it's a meditation chamber. These weren't messages for the eyes at all. Instead, they were messages for the soul. Maybe the real mystery isn't in the sky. Maybe it's in us.
Wow, that's almost deep enough to ignore how little hard evidence there actually is. Almost.
Well, you can already feel the shape of the question changing. The evidence hasn't disappeared, It's just pointing somewhere else, somewhere bigger, somewhere stranger. Next up, what if these theories are true? What does that mean? And what would the Bible, the Talmud, and the prophets of old say about these ancient beings? Now, if even a fraction of these theories are true, if ancient temples were star maps, if the gods were astronauts, if the serpents in the sky were ships, signals, or, something even stranger, then everything changes. Suddenly, human history is not linear, it's cyclical, or orchestrated, or observed. The ancients weren't guessing at the stars. They were talking to them, maybe praying, maybe recording, maybe even responding. But then the question becomes, who were they talking to? Because if the gods of Chichen Itza and Teotihuacan descended from the sky, and if they promised to return, and if they taught wisdom and order and geometry and sacrifice, then they sound eerily similar to other beings mentioned in another ancient text. In Genesis 6:4, it says the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of man and had children by them. Sons of God, not gods, not serpents, but a flying reptilian humanoid interdimensional species that exists wherever God happens to be. A place the Hebrew describes as Shamayim, the heavens, and some of whom, particularly a faction of rebels, may have descended to our realm, our plane of existence. The Book of Enoch expands on this idea, though I think that the species described in both Genesis and in the Book of Enoch are much more like humans, yet still another faction of rebels that descended to Mount Hermon in what is present-day Israel, Lebanon, and Syria, sharing knowledge of stars, weapons, and hidden things, and corrupting mankind. They taught astrology, they taught medicine, they taught sorcery, and then they were judged. In the Midrash, which is a classical Jewish mode of interpreting scripture, there's a tradition that before the giving of the Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Hebrew scriptures, the nations of the world were offered the truth, and they rejected it in favor of other teachers. Not divine, but definitely bright, definitely older, and absolutely holding knowledge that we would consider advanced and pretty valuable. But beings of light, beings of advanced knowledge, beings of higher intelligence, well, they can deceive.
Beings of light with impressive resumes and sketchy motives? Yes, we've seen that movie before. Usually right before someone signs a contract in blood, which they didn't read in full. Why am I not surprised the majority of you do not exercise critical thinking skills? I once convinced a guy, in Tulsa, that a glowing orb was his ascended self, trying to reconnect. I told him he had to bury all his electronics and live off crystal vibrations for 6 months. He sold his house, shaved his eyebrows, and was last seen, trying to charge his phone with a quartz rock and a dream.
Zorgo, that is honestly terrible. Anyway, in 2 Corinthians 11:14, the Apostle Paul writes, even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. The serpent in Eden wasn't just a snake. In Jewish tradition, he was a being of immense intelligence, able to speak, reason, and deceive. In fact, there's reason to believe the serpent in the Garden of Eden may have been a high-ranking, rebellious seraph, just like Kukulkan, just like Quetzalcoatl, just like perhaps Zeus and his dragons. There's a common thread throughout all of this. These beings descend to our realm and they give us gifts, and they all eventually demand worship. So what if these gods weren't intergalactic aliens at all? What if they were actually the same fallen intelligences spoken of in the Hebrew scriptures, in the New Testament, and in many other ancient extra-biblical Hebrew texts? Beings who mingled with humanity, not to give us, true upgrades, acting like, some kind of kindly Prometheus giving cavemen fire, but to enslave us with knowledge before its time. The Tower of Babel and the people who were building it were not punished because they were building a tall building. They were punished because mankind was accessing power that bypassed a relationship with the God of the universe. And these guys, they wanted to storm heaven's gates. It was a counterfeit Eden. It was a bootleg heaven. So I think we should all be asking ourselves, if the Maya tracked galactic alignment with precision, if the gods gave them calendars and language and blood rituals, then who gave them that knowledge and why did they disappear? I think that there is an answer to that, and I talk about it in my forthcoming book, In the Shadow of Goliath, which is going to hit bookstores in March 2026. But let me just say that these old gods aren't the only ones who are prophesied to come back. In the book of Revelation, a different kind of return is foretold. Behold, he is coming with the clouds, and every eye will see him. That's Revelation 1:7. That's the Son of Man. That's the Son of God. And he won't show up in a serpent's form. As it says in the Pesach Haggadah, which is the book and ritual script that Jews use during the Passover Seder, it says, I am not a messenger. I am not a seraph. I am not an angel. I, the Lord, and none else. He will arrive in power, in light, and in judgment. And this time, there will be no confusion. Maybe the ancients did speak with the stars, okay? In fact, did you know that the Hebrew scriptures repeatedly refer to angelic species as the morning stars? So yeah, maybe they spoke with the stars and the stars spoke back. But the ultimate truth is not found in the stars, in the morning stars, in angelic beings, and it's not hidden in stone. It is written in the Hebrew scriptures, in the New Testament, and it's actually also deep within your own soul. So if you felt anything in what I've been talking about right now, don't ignore it, because we're not just uncovering the past right now. This world is full of competing narratives, and it behooves every single one of us to sift through the noise and begin digging for the truth harder than we ever have before. And I will just leave you with one small thing, and that is this. The God of Israel, the God of the entire creation, said that on the day that we seek for him with our whole hearts, we would find him. And that's a promise that you should take him up on, because God is truth. Now, if you made it this far, all the way through my spiel, I just want to say thank you for joining us. If you want to go deeper, join me on Patreon, or join me and Zorgo on Patreon. The link is in the video description below. Support us, support our work here, help us dig where others won't, and ask the questions that most channels are too scared to ask. And remember, some monuments were built to worship and honor the gods. But considering the horrific practices surrounding them, I mean, you saw the movie Apocalypto that Mel Gibson put out, right? Maybe we should see these structures less as tributes and more as warnings. After all, those so-called gods may yet return in one form or another until the true king comes to humanity's rescue. Sleep tight.